Hello and welcome. What I have here in front of me today is a Darth Nihilus hilt from Holochron Sabers. So before I start talking about this hilt model, let me mention that this is one of 3 lightsaber models offered by Holochron Sabers. They offer a Darth Nihilus, a Sith Acolyte, and a Starkiller model, and every so often you can catch a weird one-off floating around. Now if you haven't heard of Holochron Sabers before, the reason for that is that name really isn't all too accurate. Holochron is what the maker of these sabers used to be known as back when he had an Etsy shop. He no longer has an Etsy shop. These days he sells things almost exclusively on eBay. His eBay handle is Cookie Monster or something or another. But he sells them one at a time, and after they sell there's a little bit of a lag time before he relists one more of each model. The wait time on this thing wasn't too bad. It was only about 3 weeks after my order before I got it. But they're kind of scarce, kind of hard to come by, and the primary place that you're actually going to see these is in the 501st Legion. Those people who are wearing Nihilus costumes, if they do their research, this is at current. I'm going to be shooting another video on something new, but at current, this is the only Darth Nihilus hilt really on the market. So that's where you see it, the people who go out of their way to get this, just because it's a Darth Nihilus hilt. So, at any rate, let me talk a little bit about what this is, and what's in it, and what you get. First off, I would mention that this is a pretty dang cheap saber. All things told, these sabers run about $150, and that's after shipping. It's a fairly nice lightsaber. You can, lightsaber, see what I did there? It's a fairly nice, not heavy saber. Yeah, okay. It's relatively well balanced, not too many sharp edges on it. Let me go ahead and give the camera a close-up of the saber design real quick, and then I'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so you saw kind of a neat design there. This is actually achieved, as near as I can tell, from a whole bunch of layered tubes. It looks like there's a base layer tube, and then there's another layer on top with these that's sort of been cut at an angle and then laid on top and fused together. A top layer here for this ridge. All things told, it looks like there's about 5 layers of tubes, and I'm not certain how they're fused together, whether it was electric or some sort of glue, but I don't think it's glue, because I've exposed this to some pretty severe heat extremes, and I've tried to see if I could pull this top emitter off, and it was a no-go. So it's a fairly sturdy design, kind of an interesting way to do it. You notice that the button, in terms of the activation, there you go. This thing has a ripper blade on it right now, ripper unstable, they don't come with these. You notice though that the light is a pretty deep red. I believe this is a deep red dye, and it's not particularly bright. The real horror show, if you notice the button, that was an indicator of things to come. This sort of cheap plastic button right there. The way that you get to the internals, there's a little set screw right here. I've actually replaced it with something with a knob on it, but the original set screw was just like a blade retention screw. You remove that set screw, this part right here comes out, and what's inside I will have to show you so that you can see it. So like I said, a bit of a horror show inside. What we have here is actually speaker wire. Attached with wire tape onto 2 wires that go to the switch and 2 wires that go to 2 unsecured AAA batteries. The whole thing just sort of folds up together and slides into the hilt and then gets secured with that 1 set screw. So now, this is why a lot of these things that you see on the custom market, because people buy it for the hilt, scrap the internals, and install their own. I've seen these things with nano biscotte cards in them quite frequently. The good news is that for this design, it's a relatively nice design. The internals are junk, but at $150, you'd pay that for an empty hilt from a lot of places like Saber Forge. So really, the electronics are kind of a bonus. You can use them as a placeholder until you get something better, or you can just make do with them as they are. But at any rate, this is the Holochron Nihilus. Now, one other thing about this, the maker of these things has kind of a bad reputation on the forums. He's had some history in past with unfulfilled orders and things like that. There's a lot of people who, when you talk about ordering one of these things, will say, well, but do you really want to support that? For my money, there was not a lot of option. I use a Nihilus costume with the 501st Legion, and so this is the only Nihilus hilt that's out there. So you're kind of over a barrel in that sense. It's not a bad hilt, and if you're buying it someplace like eBay, you have buyer protection, or at least a reasonable amount of buyer protection. So you don't have the same sort of danger that you had when you were just paying somebody through PayPal over a forum and expecting them to get their order get the order produced. So at any rate, Darth Nihilus hilt. Let me take the blade tension screw out real quick. Alright, there we go. So the LED seems to be also fused on the inside. It doesn't actually come out, and there isn't an LED set screw unless it's under one of these ridges. I haven't been able to find it. D-ring attachment, I didn't mention that, but it comes with a little D-ring attachment. I see a lot of people take these off. Sort of open on the end here as it gets into the electronics, but you can use that for a vent if you do end up deciding to do sound with it. So, fairly nice hilt, fairly inexpensive hilt, definitely a stunt unless you want to customize, but not a bad Nihilus design considering that this is a very, very unpopular but popular, meaning there's not a lot of them, but there's quite a bit of demand. I've heard this referred to as a unicorn hilt quite frequently. So there you have it. Hope that helps you out, and if it does, please join me back for more reviews.